I'm Richard Kimblin, and this is the Planning Podcast, which returns to this new year for a very particular purpose, and that is pupillage, the on-the-job training which is required for practice. It's a very hard position to secure, and a testing and formative process for those who do obtain a pupillage. The application process opened last week, so let's talk about it. Planning and environmental law is not on the radar of every law student, so the Planning Podcast has tried to help a little to do so. We spoke to Anna Stein, who is a successful pupillage applicant and will be commencing her pupillage in the autumn of this year. And also to Christian Hawley, planning and environmental barrister at No5 Chambers and a much valued contributor to this podcast. So, hello and good afternoon to you. Christian, you're joining this podcast focusing on pupillage. How are you keeping?
I'm very well, thank you, Richard. Very well. Looking forward to Christmas. That's the time of our podcast. But this is a little treat that people can unwrap on Christmas Day and have a listen to whilst they're planning their future, can't they?
Planning their future. And we're joined by Anna. Anna, hello, good afternoon to you.
Hello, good afternoon.
Now you're joining us in a slightly different capacity in that you will be joining our group to do a pupillage in the not too distant future.
Indeed, I'll be starting in October 2023 and I'm very excited and only mildly terrified at the prospect.
Well, it's great that you're joining us because I expect that, in fact, those listening to this podcast will be much more interested in what you have to say because you've just been through the process. And so we'll turn to that a little bit later on, I think, and you can give away all of our secrets.
I'll do what I can to help.
But let's start off by just canvassing the question, why on earth it is that not everybody who wants to be a barrister wants to do planning and environmental work. For my part, I cannot understand why anybody would want to do anything else. So let's see if that proposition stands any testing at all. Let's start off with Christian and let's have a look at the planning aspect first of all. Though I think that it might be arguable that in fact all planning work is really environmental work, some of it in disguise. But let's look at planning first. Let's look at three ways in which it comes up: local plans, the housing issues, and infrastructure. On local plans, Christian, it struck me that this is just such a fantastic process to be involved in because essentially you're getting to play with what's going to happen to an important size of administrative area, districts, and you're planning for what's going to happen there for decades ahead. For those who are power mad, isn't it a great thing to be involved in?
Absolutely. And that's what it is. It's covering everything that a district might need for a period of 20 years, 25 years. I mean, essentially, for anybody who had even the slightest hankering for SimCity or civilization as a younger self, going and tinkering in the local plan process really is something which can be hugely interesting and rewarding. And there's all the different aspects of the local plan. It's not all just about housing sites. It's about where are we going to provide the jobs for the people who are going to live in the houses? Where are we and how are we going to provide the roads for people to be able to get to the jobs and go to their houses? And how are we going to provide the healthcare infrastructure for them and do their shopping? And what other interesting things are we going to do in terms of our particular area? Are there heritage regeneration projects? Is there a particular need for certain types of facilities or redevelopment? How do you play on the strengths of a particular area in order to promote growth and prosperity? And that essentially is what the task of the local plan is. Forget what it says in the Daily Mail, that it's all about housing being imposed upon people on glorious countryside and spoiling their views. If you want to be involved in planning in the sense of actually planning something rather than reactively dealing with something, then the local plan is where it's at.
But that doesn't sound like barristering. So where's the advice in that and where's the advocacy? Where do you get to be involved in shaping, persuading, and getting the outcome that your client wants?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Those are the key words, shaping and persuading. It's a long process. It's a process that you dip in and out of. So, this isn't a case for a day. This can be a case for years. Absolutely years. These cases are cases that can just keep on giving, and they become familiar friends. And often, eventually, even having faced adversity, you get there in the end. And what it requires as a discipline is, of course, no, you're not standing up in a dark Victorian court wearing a wig and addressing somebody in a very formal manner. What you're actually doing is working a room. But before you even get to working the room and convincing the inspector that actually some part of what you're saying might have merit and be worth further investigation or further consideration, in all of the build up to that, you are dealing with all of the written submissions, all of the promotion, in effect, of whatever it is, whatever aspect of the plan that you are dealing with, what your client wishes to promote, to find an opportunity to get the decision maker's attention. And then, having been given that opportunity, you then need to convince the decision maker of the merit of what you are proposing. And that's advocacy. It's not advocacy in the sense of formal court work, but it's persuasion. And that's what makes it interesting. And it also makes it interesting because it's a bit of a mixed field. There'll be all sorts of people in that room: councillors, parish councillors, planning consultants, people representing themselves, council officers. So it's a different experience, but it's a valuable experience, and it's a rewarding experience.
And for me, not least because it's a strategic endeavour. It's a process of understanding what the tools are available to you, be they case law, the operation of statute, for example, in respect of how the whole thing's going to be assessed for its environmental effects, and politics. These things are inherently political, and understanding how all of those tools and all of those contributing factors can be deployed to assist, or are bear traps that you need to navigate your way around. But ultimately, we might move from local plan work, we might move to appeal work, where typically one finds housing proposals to be contentious. But what are we talking about there? Are we talking about houses, or are we talking about, particularly, I know in your instance, Christian, you've done a lot of work which has taken us to topics which might not instantly prompt you to think that you're concerned with planning for housing.
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do housing, but I have a very mixed diet. So my opinion is there is no bright line between planning and environmental work. And I am interested in doing a range of work. And I also have niggling at the back of my mind when anything comes in, the thought of, well, what might this lead to? Because I have had cases that have come in that have led to parts of the law and parts of the world that I never thought I'd end up being involved in. I mean, it's not everyone's cup of tea to be engaged in the question of nutrient deposition from intensive poultry units on farms. And I appreciate that, a few years ago, I might have thought, why would I want to be involved in something like that? But the nature of the work and the fact that you're always learning something new, you have to do a lot of investigation, not just of black letter law. What do the cases say? What does the case law tell me? Because I need to find the right case law, and then I need to follow that. So often with these cases, there is case law that touches upon the subject and might guide you to a certain point. But equally as much of that is understanding the factual, scientific or technical nature of the project that you're dealing with. Because at appeal, you are not dealing with a question of law. You are dealing with essentially convincing the decision maker that what you are proposing should be approved. Or, if you're on the other side, what is being proposed should be refused. And yes, every so often there'll be some immovable roadblock in terms of what the law tells us. You haven't done the right reptile surveys at the right time. You haven't shown that protected species won't be harmed by your proposal. Don't pass go straight to jail. All the timing's worked out badly for you. But they're avoidable and relatively rare, those circumstances. Most of the time, there is always an argument to be had on the particular circumstances of the case that you're dealing with. And if you are open to a wide variety of work, you can end up doing all sorts of things. I'll admit, most of them don't sound glamorous at first, but when you're actually dealing with them, they become really interesting. And for a period of a few weeks or a few months, that is your area of expertise. Motorway service areas, as I've already said, chicken farms, agricultural buildings, housing, of course, specialist housing for older people, logistics operations, anything that you can imagine, and not just limited to the built form either, because planning also covers those things that you don't necessarily see: power stations, the electricity grid, rivers, waterways, anything that you can imagine. You can end up in a situation where your job is to listen to experts, ideally at the top of their field, because they're the people that you want on your team, telling you how all of this works.
You've made an allusion there, which means something to me, because you've referred to power stations, but without giving anything away, which would put us in trouble with the code of conduct. Are you able to say something about how legally and technically complex issues that might arise in respect of something like getting a major power station on track or keeping it on track, how complex they might be?
They can be incredibly complex. And the way to deal with that is that you need to develop a set of skills that allow you to investigate what it is, what the subject matter is, investigate whatever regulatory framework it is that sits around that and the relevant case law, and be prepared to immerse yourself in that world for a period of time to learn as much as you can. Once you've done that, the approach that you take doesn't really vary between whether it's a power station or whether it's a chicken farm or whether it's a motorway service area. The level of complexity certainly changes, but the approach that you take, which is identifying the issues, the critical issues, distilling them as simply as possible, both for your client and for the decision maker, and providing the solution / answer to what those critical issues / questions are in an easy to digest, simple to follow way. That is the approach that I personally take to whatever subject or project it is that I'm dealing with at a particular time.
You've very helpfully taken us into the topic of infrastructure. Perhaps we don't need to say too much about it, but certainly energy is one key area of infrastructure planning work which comes up. And it makes me think about just what's been going on this week. I've been doing a particular form of hearing concerned with a development consent order for nationally significant infrastructure, an NSIP, a nationally significant infrastructure project, large solar scheme. Been doing that with Hashim Mohammed, been working with others on cases relating to major transport infrastructure. And what strikes me about those is the variety of places and fora. The forum in which you end up debating these issues is so variable, so different in terms of the procedure adopted, the ways in which you can advance your client's case, either in writing or orally, by cross-examination or not. The range is fantastic. And it strikes me that it's a topic area, planning and environment that is, in which there is scope for such a variety of skill sets to really shine and to become brilliant. And that the different places that it can take you is inherently fascinating. And it's with that I want to come to the topic of environment, because again, you have there not only the variety of venues or forums, as I've referred to them, but you also have the variety of client sectors, which is just huge, from the water companies, which require representation advice in all sorts of respects, to perhaps at another end of a spectrum, the NGOs. Government is often litigating on environmental matters. And then at the other end of the scale, there's invariably it's a man, so the bloke who's operating the waste site and having difficulty with waste law and what to do with his skips. The range of advice and advocacy seems to me to be almost unparalleled. I can't think of another area of work at the bar that takes you into so many different places.
I agree, and you certainly have to be adaptable. It wouldn't suit somebody who thinks to themselves, this is the type of work I like doing and I'd like to stay in that silo. Because the way to be successful, in my view, in this practice area is to, well, as I've already said, enjoy a wide diet, but also deploy a wide range of skills, because you can be dealing one day with somebody who's got themselves in trouble with the local authority for painting their front door the wrong colour on their listed building, and they really don't see why they're getting in trouble.
Terrible bit of work to be involved in. Wrong.
It's all just wrong when that happens. People can get very upset, all the way through to dealing with, huge multinationals, advising them. And that's just on the advisory side. That's on the client side. In terms of the forums, we've already covered local plans, appearing at a local plan, public speaking, effectively. It's public advocacy in front of a mixed crowd. Then you've got appeals, but even appeals are split into a variety of different modes. Written representations, the clue's in the title. How do you convince the decision maker without ever speaking to them to give you the permission that you want, or to uphold the refusal of permission that your client wishes to be upheld, or indeed as a third party, a Rule 6 party, to get involved? And that can often be a group of residents or parish council who might be opposed to a development, but equally it could be a national body such as National Highways or the Health and Safety Executive, who have a particular point that they're concerned about in that case. You've got hearings, which generally will be a day, possibly two, where you have all of your experts, but what you don't have is the formal cross-examination. And that's a difficult forum to balance, because you as the advocate are not there to give evidence. And at the very start of every hearing, you'll be told, appreciate you're here, but of course this is a hearing. And it's striking the balance between being able to steer the debate, make relevant points, but without actually overtaking or dominating proceedings, because that's not your role in a hearing, through to, full-on public inquiry, cross-examination, over to the barrister, the witness is yours, and there you are, centre of attention for however long you want to ask questions for, including formal opening submissions, formal closing submissions, the full raft of works. All of those forms involve written reps, is obviously just written work, but hearings and certainly inquiries involve both advocacy, presentation, cross-examination, and written work. Closings are pretty much always written now. Sometimes they will run to far too many pages that take far too long to read out.
Give me your honest view. Is it damned hard work?
It is, yes. It's very demanding. I'll be honest, the hardest bit for me is when I have had the new interesting case come in. It's all glittery and shiny, and it's attracted my attention. So I immediately put down the other bit of work that's got a bit mundane, and I start playing with this glittery, shiny new case that I've been gifted. And then I start thinking about it some more, and I start to do a bit of research, and then I start to think about, well, what are the issues here? How do I solve them? What's the best outcome for my client? Then I do all of that investigation, and maybe I change my view on certain things, or certain views are reinforced, and then I've got the answer, and that makes me really happy, because I've done the job. I've looked at the problem and I've got the answer. But then then I have to write it all down, and that's less exciting. But it's the nature of the job. And then when you've finished it again, you read it and you think, that's not bad if I don't say so myself. I think I've managed to tell them what I thought I wanted to say. And I think actually we might now be in a better position than we were before I started this. I think I've added some value. That is rewarding.
Adding value. Anna, does that sound like the job that you thought you were going to end up doing? Or have we just surprised you?
No, it sounds like the job I very much hoped I'd be doing. And I was just thinking how disappointing it is that I'm not starting for another 9 or 10 months. It sounds like the perfect job without meaning to sound too sycophantic. I think the earlier discussions about why it was important are really inspiring, because I think, in my view, it's a very radical area. There's nothing more radical than engaging strategically with what we want our society to look like in the long term. And it seems to me that that's what planning and environment law is about. What are the areas that we prioritize? What are the principles we want to uphold? Where do we want to invest? The arguments about those things take place on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month level, but actually bringing them into being happens on the time frame of years or decades. So I think that it is a very political and radical area, and very much regretting having to go back to my boring interim job when in January, when everyone goes back to work.
Well, I'm sure that's not the case at all. And we're very, very much looking forward to seeing you in the autumn of next year. Let's come back to that in a moment, because I think that you might be able to assist those who are listening in by giving away some of our secrets on our application process. But we'll come back to that in a moment. I just wanted to mention this really in the context of what you've just said, because you were talking about shaping things as they might affect the public and the role of law in that. And while it might not be exactly what everybody listening has in mind when they have the phrase public law in mind, it does strike me that planning and environmental work is a species of public law which is inherently fascinating, inherently not just widely applicable, but universally applicable, that the decisions which are made affect the public at large. The law involved, and you use the word radical in the sense that it's radically dynamic, and it's so frequently changing. Member of our chamber's happy experience of collecting a judgment from the Supreme Court just this week in his favour, essentially black letter law, working out how a particular consenting process should work. With others, I'm preparing another case for the Supreme Court in February, which is really at the interface between what is built and the way in which people can express their opinions about that, set of protester issues, and taking you very much into the whole area of civil litigation and the role of injunctive relief. Likewise, during the course of 2 weeks ago now, there was another Supreme Court case handed down in respect of abortion issues in Northern Ireland, and whether or not the devolved administration there can bring about a bill which prohibits protest in the vicinity of abortion clinics to create safe zones for women. And what's really fascinating about that particular aspect of what's essentially constitutional law is that it brought into the argument all of the cases about protest in the context of development. And the interaction between these areas of law is ever fertile. You now cannot do planning and environmental law without interacting with areas which are perhaps, on one view, well outside of the normal scope. But it's going to be vital to understand what happens in the context of protecting women's access to abortion services. That's the factual context, but the analysis of the human rights issues is consistent across the board. To what extent can those who want to protest voice their views in a particular location or way. And so for me, it's an area of activity which allows you to think strategically. Where do you put the 10,000 houses? How do you deal with conflicting rights? And can you really get your head round what 5 or 6 experts in different disciplines are saying in topic areas which are immensely complicated? A fortnight recently spent in Exeter on a whole series of hydrogeological issues in respect of minerals development taxed all of us. Who knows what the result will be? But you get to do all of those things in the course of one term. And going back to what I said at the beginning, quite why anybody wants to do anything else is completely beyond me. But there we are. That marks me out perhaps as odd. But let's turn to how one gets into that. Let's turn back to you, Anna, and I guess you filled in a form.
It definitely begins with a lot of form filling, yes.
Tell us about your experience of because you were successful in filling in your form. That was a bit of written advocacy. It persuaded us that we should get together at a first interview. But was there anything particular about how you were persuading us that you were somebody we should interview?
Well, I think that at the outset, I should say that I do believe there is a healthy dollop of luck in there, because the pool of applicants is highly, highly qualified and enormous. So I think that's an important caveat to begin with. But I think there are a few things that I did that brought luck down upon me as well. I chose the chambers that I applied to very carefully. That is, I still applied to a lot of chambers because it is a very difficult process. But I was very clear about what it was that I wanted to practice, the areas of law in which I wanted to practice for my pupillage, and I applied to chambers that had that skill set, that offered that area of law. So that was a very kind of clear framing. And essentially, once I'd made it clear, once I decided the chambers to which I was going to apply, I took the decision that although it was a significant investment of time and, dare I say, at some point sanity, not to ever copy and paste answers from form to form, because I took the view that the application form is the first sift and it is the biggest hurdle to get across. The rate of attrition, I have no idea about numbers, but from the paper applications to the first round interviews, I mean, that's the hardest hurdle statistically to clear. So making the decision to prioritize filling out the paper form, although it takes a significant amount of effort, really, I think probably paid off. And I think one of the more difficult areas or questions that really required focusing on is the ubiquitous why this chambers. And I think largely, and I mean, I might not be correct, but I took the view that chambers were using this as a sifting question, because if you put a generic answer in that showed you hadn't really put the time and the effort in, there were many other people standing behind me who were ready and capable of taking my first round interview slot. So I think really that's the biggest bit of advice that I can provide at the paper stage. I also would implore people to read their applications very clearly and to spell check. There was one application where I spelt inquiry incorrectly all the way through, which in a planning focused application was not necessarily impressive. So don't do what I did, and definitely make sure that you don't slip up with silly errors.
Yeah. Inquiry with an E would attract my attention. The numbers are frightening. I plan to spend about 6 to 8 hours going through those that will come our way in this particular area of practice. And you're right that it's immediately evident whether or not somebody has really thought about the particular chambers that they are applying to. But we are realistic. We understand that people will have irons in different fires. And it doesn't follow that because you have good reasons to apply to set A, that there are not good reasons, which may be different reasons, to apply to set B. What we're interested in is whether or not there are honest, good, well thought out reasons why we should invest time and enormous effort in you, because it is enormous. And that's what we're looking for. So then there's pass the sift, get to a first round interview with us, and as hinted there is a second round interview. With us, the numbers going through first round interviews is we're doing the maximum we can to see as many people as we can. And in that way, I explained to my family how 2 weekends disappear. And then the second round interview is the means by which I explain how a third weekend disappears. So we interview as many as we possibly can, but it is only a small subset of those who apply. Did you find the interview process to be what you expected it to be? Were we radically different from anybody else? Is there anything you want to say about it?
No, I mean, I think broadly speaking, the interviews that I participated in, both at No5 and at other sets, followed a format where the first interview was very much a sort of quickfire discussion about a series of topical questions. So it was definitely advisable to read up on areas of issues of law that were in the media under discussion, and also that generally, but also those that pertained specifically to environment and planning, given that was the pupillage that I had applied for. The second round, I must say, does number amongst one of the more terrifying experiences of my life, but actually towards the end, one of the more enjoyable. It was a sort of very surreal and challenging process. I was given a case to read and précis and then interrogated. And I think really interrogation is the word there. I would be setting people up for a surprise if I didn't make it clear that you were very much interrogated by several KCs, QCs as they were then, and others. So not for the faint-hearted, but quite a sense of achievement, I must say, at the end, not even knowing the outcome, having survived it. So I think the No5 interview process was very similar to almost all of the other sets that I received interviews with. And there's really no substitute for following the news and developing some opinions on issues under discussion in the media beforehand, because that is often where some of the topics for conversation are pulled from.
Excellent. Well, I think that it is, particularly the second round interview is challenging, and it's meant to be. Ultimately, we want our pupils to be stars in the Court of Appeal. And
that would be nice.
And in the Court of Appeal, you're ready for anything. 3 very fertile minds up in front of you, all thinking about different things and asking you questions and expecting answers very, very, very quickly, and to be very persuasive. And so that's what we're looking for. Somebody who has the potential to perform at the very, very highest level. And so it is a challenge. As an advocate, when it's challenging, you don't think to yourself, this means that it's going badly. The fact that you've engaged the tribunal, it may mean that it's going very well. So if you're at interview and it's getting gradually tougher, this might be a good thing. So there we have it. Paper, first round, second round, different in character at each stage. But what we hope is that it produces a fair result. That's what the effort goes towards. And for my part, having experienced it over a few years and looked at the results, I think that it is as fair as it possibly can be. But ultimately, the keys to the whole process lie with the applicants in putting in the work, thinking about what it is that they want to do, why they want to do it, and how they're going to communicate that via the 3 opportunities that they've got. And we look forward to it very much. Don't we, Christian? Because then it may just be that you end up supervising the pupillage of somebody we're about to recruit. That might happen, mightn't it?
It might come true. Or one day I might be a pupil supervisor, and one of our fresh intake might be subjected to that.
Well, there we are. Look, I'm really grateful to you both. It's the end of the week, it's the end of the term. You might have had other things to do, but you've spent time doing this, and I'm very grateful to you, as I'm sure many prospective applicants will be. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
That was the Planning Podcast on the particular point of planning pupillages. some interesting appeal decisions, a case or two, and the ever-present planning reform to follow during January and February. Till then, thanks for listening and take care.